Hello and welcome, and this is the first video of the cleanup videos. Basically, we're gonna have many videos on cleaning up our system, meaning improving and optimizations and many other stuff. So the first thing we're gonna do is using a state system, rather than multiple. So the state is gonna be stored like an enum. So let's begin. We're gonna move to the player controller script and comment out those locomotion rules and define an enum for the locomotion state. Add those four states accordingly and define one of them right on top. We'll comment out where we're getting the errors, and I'm going to add a switch statement right here under the sprint triggered area, and we'll check if the locomotion state is sprinting. Then we want to set it to walking, otherwise we'll set it to, well, sprinting. Similarly, in the crouch trigger, we'll do the same type of locomotion, but instead it's going to be based on crouching, and we'll set to crouching. And then here in the enable proning, we'll also do a simple state with the proning used again. But it's going to be set, basically it's going to send the locomotion state somewhere else. We'll just comment out that bool set. So if we are proning, set to walking, otherwise we're going to go to proning. And this code we can remove. We'll just add a switch locomotion. It's going to have a case. We will check if it's proning, then we set it to walking, otherwise it's proning. And a couple new changes. So just going to add the same type of thing again here. And we'll check, well, if the input vector is to vector 2.0, then I'll perform it. Over here, I'm going to comment it out and do a switch statement again. So if we are walking, then we want to set them accordingly again. So they're the default values. First, we enter this code lines. That's how I set them up. Now this chunk, well, will not comment it out. Instead, I'm going to add a function actually. So there you are. This is printing. We'll use our own public function, which is supposed to be used by anybody else outside as well. So just replace them with the functions that we already defined, and proning is not defined yet. We'll define that in just a second. So anyway, we'll replace the rest as well, just like that, instead of using any statements. But I think we should use the state check instead for this case, and we can just use a switch statement. And yep, just copy that, paste it, and comment it out, comment it, and we've got the height and center being set accordingly now. So now here I'm just going to add a new duplicate function, which is now is proning instead. And now I will replace those from the errors which we don't have the bools, instead to be a comparative with the actual state that we have defined. I'm just going to add a few summaries to these functions. Alright, so I'm reloading and we get an error, so that's actually not done here. Just going to keep just sorting one of them by just changing the functions now. We have very useful functions at the moment, so I'm just going to use a switch instead here in this case as well. We're going to check if we're crouching. We're getting some type of an error. Wait, just check like that. Yeah, because we already passed the value in. And just set the stuff accordingly again, and for this time we're just going to use proning. Crouching and proning is the thing we need to check against, and then we also have a default, meaning if none match, then just do that. Alright. So the fix is quite simple. I'm just going to use a simple if statement to handle this, as I think it's much more simpler and doesn't eat up much code lines. So I'm just going to replace the switch statement and use the simple if statement, and then comment that out. As you can see, there is no more jitter, and our system is no longer on fire. So we can also try the proning system in real time. Just enable it, and you can see it does prone, and then it also shall get out of proning. It can go in crouching as well from proning directly. So that's pretty much the first thing to do. I'm just gonna clean up by removing all the comments that we added, just to keep ourselves in backup. Just delete that off, and we're just gonna add a few useful comments as well for each of the inputs, checks, and things. So, well, there you are. Check this really. So, if we don't enable the running, then we must make sure that we are out of running, because we'll not be checking for any input after that. The speed defaults, and then we change speed if required. And there you are. Just gonna clean that top part. I don't know why that came up, but just save and get out, and everything works just like it was before. And if we enable pruning now, and I go into pruning, and from this state, let me just get my person in front of the screen. If I get out of pruning, you will see that we just got out of pruning because I disabled the pruning state. The next thing we're going to do is use state-based system ground check and weapon jump procedural anim. So I'm just going to remove that in air and near ground bools and add an enum, just like the locomotion. Similarly, we'll just have grounded and in air. We'll have two of these, and one is previous and one is the actual air state. We'll define an animation curve underneath the jump amount duration. It's the jump up curve. I'm just going to duplicate that. I'm going to, well, copy this name, make this a small by renaming it to hit instead of a big H, and then just put that underneath for the hit the ground bump as well. We also have a reference to the gun holder animator. I'm going to remove that error causing stuff and just set them all correctly. As you can see, I'm going pretty fast because it's quite simple if you understood what we did previously as well. You're setting them directly like that. And the near ground will set the air states too. It's going to be like a question mark. So if it is hit, then we set grounded, otherwise in air. In this, we'll use, well, for this case, we'll check if the previous state is not equal to a state. That means that something changed. Then we'll say if it's grounded now, the new one, then we'll trigger up an impulse with the same velocity and everything that we triggered originally on the bump impulse source, which we don't want to use anymore, because that applied it to the actual camera, and we're going to be applying it to the weapon, which makes it better. So just going to make a function here for me, and we'll pass in all the values. We're just going to define that here in here. So back to the gun holder animated, I'm going to define a public void trigger bump function with the same parameters that are needed. And what it does is it sets the bump timer plus equals tiny delta time. It updates the bump timer. We also have a bump progress. And I'm going to define another function just before completing that one, handle bump effect, and that's where it actually went, not in that function. I'm also going to define all the variables first. So let me just come back up here and define the bump force is bumping and bump timer, the bump duration as well. Just going to set those to default values. And I'm going to also create a new animation curve, which is also set to new keyframe, which is a simple curve which goes from 0 to 1 and back to 1 pretty smoothly. So as you can see, the keyframes are made like this. I'm just going to add some useful comments so you may understand what I'm doing. And then we have the actual bump curve, which is the actual bump curve that's being used. Let me just call this function every update. We check if is bumping is equal to false, then we just jump out of this. Similarly, I just want to remove that from the smooth position target, which actually returns us out of that, which is not actually what we want to do. It would not work in many cases. So anyway, is bumping is true and bump timer is 0 and force is set to force, just like that we do in the trigger bump. And we set the duration as well, the curve also. So for the curve, if it is not equal to null, then we set it to the curve that's given to us. Otherwise, we just set it to the default bump curve. In the handle bump effect, we can apply the actual effect, which is, well, local position set to start pause, plus the main bump settings of controller is sprinting, and we'll check that and pass in the sprint position offset if it is. Otherwise, we'll just add a vector 3.0, which will have no effect. Then after that, we just add a bracket and add the rest of the stuff. well, after all that, we check if the bump progress is greater than or equal to 1. We'll set the bumping to false if that is so. That way, next time we come here, we will not be doing anything, as there's no need until next time somebody actually triggers the bump action. Right, so we have this pretty much okay. Now back over here, I'm just going to comment that out as well for the jumping impulse source and just pass in my function with the vector3 reference or the amounts and the curves. Once that's done, just remove and clean up some stuff. Now back in here, we can assign the gun holder animated and set the curve. So I'm going to be setting the curve. You can use command after you start moving it to get nice and snappy movement, which gives a bit of more accuracy. I mean, it's not very wobbly and inaccurate to what you're actually doing. So if you want to get exactly one, then you can use command after starting to move it. I'm going to also position this. You can just play around with the curve to get what you love, what you like actually. So I'm just going to paste the same curve on the hit the ground and the jump up curve. So I don't think we need any much difference, but I just provide there if you actually want to have a difference. I'm going to add a bit of spaces here. I'm also going to comment out the actual reference to the bump impulse source of the camera. So because we don't need it, just pass in those values, and I just need to do a simple fix here. After we check it, we also need to set the previous state to the next state, otherwise it will never update. Now let's hit play. And as you can see, we can jump and we have a nice bump. Whether we're running or not, the bump is just additively applied. If we jump from top, we have a more well, higher value of jump effect. And now I'm just going to add those comments to this. Simple comments to each of the code lines that seem a bit complicated. Replay the jump animation, set the in-air value. I think we should set the in-air value first, then we can do the trigger, which makes a bit of more sense as well. And then we can also set the jump force. Also check if we should trigger a jump. And also set the air state there. And we also update the previous state, and that's required, otherwise we'll keep going in the bumping, and bumping might become an infinity loop. Because previous state would never equal to air state until, well, air state comes back to what it was originally. I'm just gonna come here and add some comments here as well. These are the bumping stuff actually. So that's it. And then we also want to define a new function under the start and call it initialize. So I'm just going to use this function for all the initialization. And then the head bob can have a summary as well. Check whether we should be applying the head bob, which creates the actual head bob position effects and the movement tilt. This function here will then create the effect, and the move tilt just provides a bit of movement tilt. And similarly, just a few summaries for these functions as well. Point of summaries is when you put your mouse on top of a function, you will see what it's supposed to do, which is the actual reason why I'm doing summaries there. So handles the bumping stuff, and I'm just gonna, well, delete that and close that file, save it out. So that's it for this video, and see you in the next video. Another note is that many of you don't subscribe, as you can see 81%, so make sure to subscribe and help out our channel by liking and sharing as well.